Resuming debate, the honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I'm disappointed that we're actually speaking about privatization in the CBC today, I'm very happy to take this opportunity to strongly oppose this bill and to support the continued existence of, and indeed a stronger publicly owned and publicly funded CBC.
Hear, hear.
Before I really begin, I'll mention that I have a strong history with the CBC. I've done regular spots on CBC radio for many years and have gotten to know many of the fine people who work there. So I do feel that strong connection with the CBC, particularly with CBC radio. And my comments here today mainly concern CBC radio and the critical role it provides in both providing a trusted source of news and commentary for Canadians and being a common cultural thread across our country. You know, I represent the riding of South Okanagan, West Kootenay. It's a relatively large riding, about 500 kilometres across. It's a series of isolated valleys and intervening mountain ranges. And when I drive across my riding, it is CBC that keeps me informed and entertained over 5 hours and 5 mountain passes. Because of the terrain, I have to regularly change stations to keep in touch. And I have my car radio set up with the buttons starting with Penticton, then switching frequencies at Oliver Asuyas, then again at Rock Creek, Grand Forks, again at Christina Lake, finally Castlegar Trail, then fading up the Slocan Valley until I have to switch to 900 AM in the cusp on the Arrow Lakes. And just as these stations on my car radio link my trips across South Okanagan, West Kootenay, the CBC links Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And like many Canadians, I have friends in all parts of this country, and they all listen to CBC radio. My friends on the Cape Shore in Newfoundland listen to CBC Placentia at 94.1. My friends in northern Baffin Island listen to Pond Inlet 105.1, and that's coincidentally the same frequency that my Yukon colleagues at the Arctic Institute on Kluwani Lake tune into using the Destruction Bay repeater. My friend Peter Hamill in Masset on Haida Gwaii, or Greater Masset as he likes to call it, listens to CBC at 103.9. And my Bird Studies Canada colleagues in Long Point on Lake Erie tune into Tilsonburg 88.7, although the signal's a bit sketchy out there on the lake and it's easier to listen into stations from Erie, Pennsylvania. These are not money-making stations or repeater services. They would not survive privatization, and we would lose that unifying voice that the CBC provides. But they give my friends and I a common thread to this country. We used to talk of Peter Zosky's interviews, and in recent years, the wonderful stories of Stuart McLean. And I was deeply moved by the heartfelt tributes in this place when Stuart passed away earlier this year. All of us here and all Canadians lost an important friend who knew what it was to be Canadian, who worked throughout his career to bring us together with his stories and the stories of CBC listeners that he would read on air. During the election campaign in 2015, the CBC came up in every All Candidates forum I attended. People were concerned about cuts to the CBC budget. And when I replied to those concerns that the NDP would restore the CBC's budget, I was greeted with loud applause. It was clearly something the audience fully supported. And the Liberal candidate would stand up and repeat that pledge, as they did with everything the NDP said in that campaign, and get the same strong response from the audience. Mr. Speaker, Canadians overwhelmingly and unequivocally support the CBC. And I'd like to repeat here some of the poll results in recent years regarding the CBC. In 2014, a Nanos research poll found that 72% of Canadians had high trust and confidence in the CBC. 87% of Canadians said they were in favour of increasing or maintaining funding. Only 10% said they wanted to see the broadcasters' funding cut. A 2013 Nanos research poll found that 80% of Canadians believed the CBC plays an important role in strengthening Canadian culture and identity. This poll also found that 80% of Canadians supported increasing or maintaining CBC funding, or maintaining it at its current levels, and only 16% said they would decrease it, Moreover, 57% of Conservative Party supporters said they would increase or maintain CBC funding, while only 37% would decrease it. A 2009 Polaris survey, according to the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting, said 78% of Canadians tune into some form of CBC programming. 76% rate the CBC's performance in fulfilling its mandate as good to excellent. 83% believe the CBC is important in protecting Canadian identity and culture. 74% would like to see the CBC strengthened. 63% believe that the CBC provides value for taxpayers' money. 80% believe the CBC is best suited to provide Canadian programming on television. 74% believe that annual funding to the CBC should be increased. And 54% supported the Commons Heritage Committee recommendation that CBC funding should increase to $40 per Canadian. And 20% believe that $40 per Canadian is too low. And finally, 70% of Canadians believe the CBC should be most responsible for ensuring that Canadian programming continues to be an integral part of Canadian economy and culture. Only 18% favored private broadcasters. And lastly, when asked, assume for a moment that your federal MP asks for your advice on an upcoming vote in the House of Commons on what to do about CBC funding, as we're doing now, 9% of Canadians said they would advise their MP to decrease funding. Only 9%. 30% said they would advise to maintain funding, and 47% said they would advise their MP to increase CBC funding. Now, the member from Saskatoon University actually said, perhaps in jest, that privatizing the CBC would ensure that Canadians can actually participate and own it. Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians already own the CBC, and they participate in it every day by the millions. And the CBC is one of the iconic institutions and policies that define Canada, just like universal health care. It celebrates our common culture and gives full voice to our diversity. So while I think that the member from Saskatoon University is introducing this bill to play to a very narrow base of supporters in his Conservative leadership campaign, and I don't think that this chamber is perhaps the right forum for this kind of messaging, and our time would be better spent discussing more relevant issues that are a concern to a broad spectrum of Canadians, I am very happy that this debate gave me the opportunity to speak strongly, unequivocally, in favor of a publicly owned CBC. Our country would be infinitely poorer without it. Thank you, Mr. President.